opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is the 15th of March. It's Sunday. It's 2026. Welcome to This Week with Mary Holland, President of Children's Health Defense, and myself, Polly Tommey. Well, this is, I think, going to be quite a good show, Mary.
We've got a lot of good news, Polly.
We have. All right, let's start with this. In the Defender with Suzanne Burdick, Washington Post is wrong. It's wrong on ACIP's COVID vaccine plan, HHS insider says. So the Washington Post reported that US Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. had a plan to target COVID shots. Then it fell apart. That part is incorrect, according to an inside source at HHS. The source who spoke with the Defender said the article in the Post contained assumptions and significant errors.
This article tries to suggest that there was some kind of plan and plot that Secretary Kennedy was trying to enact through ACIP. That's really not the case, is what these insiders said. The ACIP committee has a job to do, and on their agenda is today to look at, or not today, but at the upcoming meeting of March 18-19, their job is to look at injuries from the COVID shots. They never look at injuries, and also to look at long COVID. And that's great news. You know, basically, there was a lawsuit brought by the American Academy of Pediatrics and others that did cancel the ACIP's February meeting that was supposed to be held the 25th to the 27th. So this meeting is really important. There's a bit of a threat to the meeting from this continuing litigation by the American Academy of Pediatrics and others. I'm very happy that the judge in that case, Brian Murphy in Boston, asked for a friend of the court brief from Children's Health Defense, which we submitted. So we will find out very soon what the ruling is on that preliminary injunction against these actions that Kennedy has taken up until now related to vaccines on ACIP, on the shared clinical decision-making, reducing the universally recommended from 17 to 11 shots. We'll find out how that court rules, but I'm expecting this meeting to go forward, and I'm expecting it, Polly. I'm so excited that we're going to live stream it because I don't think we will have ever seen an ACIP meeting like this. This is going to be real conversation about real vaccine injuries from COVID shots and long COVID. In other words, that it didn't stop transmission for the people who took the shots and some that didn't, who just have repeated infections of this same respiratory condition. So I'm excited. We will report on it next week.
We will, and we definitely are live streaming that. So make sure you're signed up for your text alert. We will alert you when we're live with that, everyone. FDA vaccine regulator is resigning. Dr. Vinay Prasad drew criticism for overriding career scientists and rejecting drugs by companies seeking agency approval. That's the New York Times. But the Defender, as always, with the correct news, their headline, Trump administration's embattled FDA. Vaccine chief is leaving for the second time. AP News reported as also Dr. Vinay Prasad is once again leaving the agency. So people are wondering what's going on, Mary.
Yeah, so he doesn't leave until the end of April, Polly. I confess that this one does concern me. So what we do know about Dr. Prasad is that he would not give a green light for the mRNA flu vaccine that Moderna put forward. He said there was no science behind it. And he made that decision as the head of the Biologics Evaluation Research Unit. And then the FDA Commissioner Makary overrode that. So I don't think this is probably good news, but I don't think we fully understand what the implications are. We don't know who's going to take over at CBER. So we will stay on top of this for sure.
All right, Michael Novodakis in the Defender. Let food be thy medicine. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announces 50 plus medical schools will add nutrition training. Some doctors praised the initiative, while others suggested additional factors will also have to be addressed if the US wants to tackle chronic disease. For me, this is one of the best news of the week. I think it's fantastic.
I totally agree with you. I think these are really influential medical schools. So they're going to set the pace. They're getting this $5 million initiative. They're going to put 40 hours of nutrition training for these medical students starting next year, probably 26, 27. And of course, poor nutrition has everything to do with the chronic disease epidemic. So this is fantastic news. And in April, the HHS, Kennedy, is coming out with a definition of ultra processed food. He's also going after, high content things like not being able to get candy and soda on SNAP on food stamps, and he specifically called out Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts for their incredibly sugary drinks, and they're fighting back against him. But it's really exciting. I think we're starting to see real changes in the way people eat in this country, and it's long overdue.
And Governor DeSantis in Florida and his wife doing amazing work on exposing the disgustingness of candy and stuff like that. We had people on talking about that this week. Routine vaccines paralyzed their toddler. It took the government 11 years to approve a payout. The parents of Hayes Heller, paralyzed at 15 months after receiving 3 vaccines, recounted their 11-year-old's journey through the federal government's National Vaccine Injury Compensation program. It was a very upsetting story. I actually did do that story on CHD TV as well. This boy, who was this amazing, lively toddler, now, Mary, can only communicate through his eyes in some way. And he spends the whole time crying. I mean, it's one thing having Billy and his injury, but I can hear his voice. And, life can be difficult, but he walks, he talks to some degree, he can feed himself, all those kind of things. This has taken everything from that child. What a horrific story. And I'm so pleased they won, although that doesn't take away what they did to him.
No, Polly, they didn't really, it's horrific what happened to this child, Hayes. But I think what's even more important about this stuff, we know that the vaccine injury is tragic and it's despicable. But I think this is really a story about the kangaroo court nature of the injury compensation program, which is really important for people to understand. So kudos to Michael Neverdakis for writing this. He interviews, among others, Wayne Rohde, who's been such a hero in exposing what the injury compensation program is really like. So the parents in this case had to wait 13 years to get any compensation for this quadriplegic boy. There was no other explanation for what happened, but literally the Department of Justice and HHS kept drawing this out, literally, Polly, hoping that this boy would die. Because if he died, then they would only owe $250,000. Whereas if he lived, they might owe up to the $3 million that the family has already paid for his care. They actually only got 10%. So they got $300,000 of the $3 million that they've actually had to pay for the child's 10 surgeries and 20 procedures. It's a totally failed system, Polly. Like, if this boy who was perfectly healthy and then completely became paralyzed after these shots, if he can't get compensation for 11 years and then only gets 10%, I mean, it's just a totally broken system. So I'm grateful that we're exposing it. I am so sad for this child, but I'm glad that the family got something. And I'm glad that they told their story so that other people can really, I hope, take this into account before they make these decisions, because this could happen to your child.
HHS reinstated vaccine safety task force after Children's Health Defence sued the agency. ICANN urges HHS to take next steps. So in a March the 6th letter, the Informed Consent Action Network called on top federal health officials and the task force on safer childhood vaccines to implement major reforms to improve the US vaccine system. HHS reinstated the task force since 1998 after a lawsuit funded by Children's Health Defence and filed by attorney Ray Flores demanded HHS re-establish it.
So this was a triumph that Ray Flores brought with funding from CHD to reestablish the task force that's called for by the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury. It never reported to Congress, Polly. It's in the law. They're supposed to have been doing this for 40 years. It's never happened. And it's because of CHD that this is now on track. So it's great that Aaron Siri, on behalf of ICANN, wrote recommendations for what this task force should consider. And we completely agree with these recommendations. They should be releasing data so that they can be verified, studied by the public. There should be more legitimate Freedom of Information Acts. The letter points out that in the emails from Tony Fauci, we understand that they were specifically trying to avoid freedom of information. There shouldn't be the same kinds of conflicts of interest that we have now, trying to get at the root of the conflicts of interest, because lots of doctors and scientists at National Institutes of Health are getting essentially kickbacks from NIH grants. So total conflict there. And then the letter talks about the need to end all medical mandates and to expand and improve the vaccine injury compensation program. Very useful letter for what the task force should be doing.
Okay, Michael Navadakis, defender, Florida lawmaker urges Trump to protect religious exemption. In a letter to President Donald Trump, Representative Greg Steube asked the administration to take all available steps up to and including issuing an executive order to ensure the appropriate protection of individuals' civil liberties and religious freedoms with respect to all vaccines.
Polly, we take a strong view here. We're so grateful for this letter from Representative Steube, signed by other Congresspeople, to have the administration take this issue of the deprivation of religious liberty very serious, including the possibility of an executive order to enforce the First Amendment and free exercise of religion on these recalcitrant states, California, New York, Connecticut, Maine, that used to have religious exemptions. We support this wholeheartedly. It's critical to restore the religious exemptions to the states that are currently withholding them. And it's very clear, we'll talk about this more from polling data, Polly, that Americans support this. And literally a completely separate from, vaccine-related organization called Beckett's, they have a religious freedom index, and a majority of people support religious exemptions to vaccination. So I personally feel like there's not only this pressure from Congress, there's this pressure from the administration and the Religious Liberty Commission, there's pressure in the courts. I think there's pressure from public opinion. I really do believe that there's a lot of pressure on California, New York, Connecticut, Maine to restore the religious exemption to vaccination. The data is just becoming so clear that one size doesn't fit all. These shots are harm and kill kids, and people have a religious right to say, no, I'm not going to do this to my child.
Absolutely. Well, Michael Navadakis again, and the defender, FDA unveils new vaccine injury tracking system. Is it any better than the old one? The FDA's new adverse event monitoring system for drugs and vaccines merges the agency's previously separate adverse event reporting system for drugs and vaccines and other products. Some critics said the new database does little to solve long-standing problems with the federal government's follow-up and verification of adverse event reports. What do you think, Mary?
The problem that our scientist, Carl Jablanowski, points out here, Polly, is that this system is just aggregating drug, vaccine, cosmetic adverse reactions, and it's being generated by AI. AI is not necessarily better from a human. We don't know enough about how the system's going to work, how are people going to be held accountable. We have a number of citations here, comments from React 19, from Joel Walskog, from Chris Dreisbach, from Albert Benavides, who really follows VAERS, that the FDA never inputted adequately the data to go into VAERS. So they're skeptical, Polly, that this is an improvement. I think we have to follow this and see what's going to happen. But we shouldn't assume that just because they rebrand it and they combine it, that it's necessarily better because they've added the AI secret ingredient.
Okay, Suzanne Burdick, defender. A giant problem. Experts address massive epidemic of vaccine injury. The US must address the massive epidemic of vaccine injury, according to scientists, doctors, lawyers, and medical freedom activists who convened in Washington, D.C. at the roundtable. I want people to understand that vaccine injuries are common, said Maha Institute President Mark Gordon. I watched it from the beginning to the end. Not often I get a chance to do that, and I thought it was very well done. It was very good.
I agree. I was there, Polly. Kudos to Mark Gordon, the chair of Maha Institute, who's also on the Children's Health Defense Board. We do need to really now be explaining to the public that vaccine injury goes so far beyond autism, which is definitely a vaccine injury, but it goes so far beyond even just paralysis. It's all of the autoimmune disorders. It's all of the disruptions of the immune system. And it was an excellent conference. I do recommend that people go back and watch it. I think one of the most important comments was from Toby Rogers, our dear friend, social scientist, who says, we're in the midst of a paradigm shift and it's always painful. And I commented, I really do think that we're coming to the end of the era of forced medicine. But we're not quite there yet. We've got to get rid of these mandates. The first step is to have a universal religious exemption. But I really do believe there was a lot of energy in that room, and I think there's a lot of public support for what we're doing at this point, Polly. The media was there and they're covering what we do, which you and I both know that wasn't the case 10 years ago.
And I really, Brian Hooker, our Chief Scientific Officer, was there. He did a great job. And I really enjoyed the pediatricians panel. I thought it was really
Well, it
interesting.
was so, pediatricians that we've worked with for many years, Polly, Larry Pileski, Liz Mumper, and a younger pediatrician, Dr. Walsh, Joel Walsh was there. And it was a really good panel talking about what should young families do. It was a great conference. The second panel was about COVID, and then there were some just initial comments. And I particularly thought that Mark Gorton's opening lecture about the extent of vaccine injury, how it happens, why it's plausible, it's very important. And the good news is that in his comments, he said that Health and Human Services under Secretary Kennedy has commissioned over 100 studies on vaccine injury. I candidly need to find out. We need to make a list of those. We haven't done that yet, but it was a great conference. We will be talking a lot about, as we do every day, but talking about vaccine injury. And Polly, to you, one of the other really important things that Toby Rogers said was it's the stories that get to people. It's not the data. It's not the science per se. It's the stories. It's people's narratives. And that's what you've been doing for many, many years. And it absolutely is making a difference. It is moving this issue.
Well, it's the people, it's everybody, it's all of you watching now, all of you that came to the bus and told your stories. You're the ones that are making a difference. So keep telling your stories. Contact us if you have a story, because it's very important that we catalogue these. Brenda Belletti in The Defender. Not going down without a fight. Hundreds testify against Connecticut bills expanding state vaccine powers. A marathon Connecticut legislative hearing lasting more than 14 hours drew oral and written testimony from over 2,000 parents, medical professionals, and community members, most opposing two proposed bills that would expand the state health department's authority over vaccine recommendations and reinforce the state's ban on religious exemptions for school immunization requirements. Over 2,000, that's people getting involved, Mary.
It's fantastic. We've been battling in Connecticut for many years, and there's very strong opposition, and there's a very live lawsuit in state court, which I think the governor realizes could win. And that is a lawsuit that says Connecticut is one of the few states in the country that had adopted a Religious Freedom Restoration Act in state law. And under state law, three families are arguing we have a right under Connecticut law to a religious exemption. The repeal of the religious exemption in 2021 in Connecticut is illegitimate under state law. And our friend and attorney Rick Jaffe also put in testimony saying it's also, it's the First Amendment. You have a right to free exercise of religion. So I'm so thrilled that there were over 2,000 testimonies, 14 hours. There was also an effort, Polly, of a bill to have recommendations for adult vaccines. There was such strong pushback, and I think it sends a signal. Like I don't know what's going to happen here, but it is really clear that there is a big part of the public that is insisting on its rights in these 4 states that deprive people of the right to a religious exemption.
Jill Erzan here in The Defender. The people showed up. South Carolina lawmakers side with parental choice in 2 vaccine votes. South Carolina senators debated 2 approaches to childhood vaccination, but ultimately sided with parental choice. A Senate panel advanced a bill blocking vaccine mandates for children under 2 and rejected a proposal to eliminate religious exemptions for the MMR vaccine. Vaccine mandates need to be repealed, not entrenched, said Dawn Richardson of the National Vaccine Information Center. Yeah,
this is more evidence, Polly, that we're winning, right? This is a Senate panel in South Carolina that in really lopsided votes, 7-1 and 6-2, said, no, there shouldn't be any mandates for children under 2, and no, there's no exception to the religious exemption for measles, mumps, rubella shot. So this is just real hard evidence that our movement is making a difference, and it is determining outcomes in states.
Yeah, this really, when you read articles like this, you really do believe what you say when you say we're winning.
We are. We're not there yet, but the mandates are coming down. The mandates are coming down. Look at those votes. This is mainstream, Polly, and 7-1 and 6-2 votes. This was not at the margin, right? So it's exciting.
I think also people are becoming more angry because the injury is so bad, and also people are becoming they feel more safe with Bobby in as HHS. They feel just that little bit safer to get out there and do their thing, and it's working. All of it's working.
And all of this is post-COVID, Polly. The only silver lining to COVID, the only silver lining is that millions of people realized how dangerous vaccines can be and that they have to have a right to be able to say no.
Okay, Branson Institute here in The Defender, a new poll, almost 90% of US voters support right to refuse medical treatment. This is a poll conducted by Zogby Strategies and found a supermajority of voters favor medical and health freedom. The poll commissioned by Health Freedom Defense Fund and Branson Institute found that 80.4% of adults believe they should have the right to refuse vaccines. That's huge, Mary.
Polly, this is a very reputable pollster, Zogby Polling, that we've worked with in the past. This is a really important poll. This is a likely voters. It's pretty much a third Republicans, a third Democrats, a third independents. These are people who will vote. And it showed very strong support for medical autonomy, for medical freedom, transparency, choice, remarkable coherence here. Anything that's 80 to 88% likely that these people would support measures for health freedom. Again, like, we are winning. We are absolutely winning. This is not a marginal issue. This is a winning issue.
Okay, Jill Erzan again in The Defender. Equity for all patients. Arizona Senate moves to end vaccine incentives for doctors. This is my dream. The Arizona Senate passed a bill that would bar insurance companies from paying doctors different rates based on whether their patients received recommended vaccines. Supporters say the measure would help families who struggle to find pediatricians if their children don't follow the full vaccine schedule. Oh my gosh, Mary, more of this, please.
More great news. So this was a party line vote, but it was 16 to 13, and they will bar insurance companies from paying doctors incentives for vaccination. And this, Polly, it sets the pace, right? So this passed in Arizona. This is going to be looked at by other states. It's very exciting.
US Right to Know in The Defender. How can we infect humans with a bat coronavirus? Scientists were asking that question long before COVID. Internal NIH documents show that scientists, backed by US government grants, proposed modifying viral spike proteins to test whether bat viruses could bind more tightly to human receptors. They also explored changes to the viruses and sites and molecular switches that allowed them to unlock and enter cells more efficiently.
This gain of function, so-called, it's a euphemism, this bioweapons research has got to stop. It is so dangerous. They were working for decades on this special way to make the bat coronaviruses more pathological and more lethal in humans. This is the work of Ralph Barrick at University of North Carolina, being funded by the federal government. And there was this Diffuse project and the Predict project, and they knew that they were playing with fire. It's so outrageous to me. And Polly, the worst of it is, a lot of this research is still continuing. We've got to keep up the pressure on this. This so-called gain of function, which is really bioweapons research, is just, it's really terrible. It's really terrible. It's truly playing with fire.
Absolutely. Brenda Belletti here. Health official calls for review of India's massive HPV vaccine campaign. Donthi Narasimha Reddy, PhD, visiting senior fellow at the Impact and Policy Research Institute in India, called for an independent scientific review of the country's 90-day campaign to give free HPV vaccines to an estimated 150 million teenage girls. Citing past issues with the vaccine, including 7 deaths in a previous HPV vaccine trial, Reddy said screening for cervical cancer is safer and more effective than the vaccines.
Well, I'm grateful for Dr. Reddy for calling this out, Polly. It's really scandalous that India is doing this. Honestly, I'm pretty shocked, because in the book that Kim Mack-Rosenberg, Eileen Ioria, and I co-wrote, called The HPV Vaccine on Trial, Seeking Justice for a Generation Betrayed, There was a scandal in India where girls died, and it was obvious that the Gates-funded PATH organization was not getting informed consent, was lying to families and to the girls about what the shot was. They said it would prevent cancer altogether. They got signatures from people of an X because they were illiterate. They had no idea what they were being given. And kids can die from the shot. Kids can be profoundly injured. There's really no surveillance of the adverse events. It's very distressing. I'm at least glad that Dr. Reddy called it out. I hope that people don't take their girls to get vaccinated there. There's really no infrastructure in the event that there are injuries.
Okay, this is the Daily Mail reporting in the Defender. Big heads up to the UK here. Ban unvaccinated children from schools. Experts urge amid growing measles crisis as they discuss the possibility of mandating the MMR jabs. Emma Best, who's the chairman of the London Assembly Health Committee, said excluding pupils who have not had the MMR jab may soon be necessary if vaccination rates continue to fall. There is a point where it becomes too dangerous for an unvaccinated child to be in that environment. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Polly, it's ridiculous. You know, a couple kids get measles. If the measles vaccines worked, then they would have nothing to fear from somebody who's unvaccinated. This is just silly. And they don't have mandates, and I don't think they're going to be able to put them in place right now. We've just been talking about how public opinion is really shifting on this issue.
Well, the UK homeschooling movement is it was unheard of when I was a mother. I didn't know anybody who homeschooled, but it's growing like crazy over there because people just had enough, just like they have over here. Fact or fear? CDC warns travellers about polio, and here's what the data shows. Dr. Suzanne Humphries challenged a CDC travel advisory warning about polio outbreaks in at least 30 countries. In an interview that many of you saw on Monday, Dr. Humphries said the media exaggerated the threat. She said the travel advisory relied largely on wastewater detections rather than human cases, and that the CDC ignored data showing most infections cause no symptoms. And what I love about this from Children's Health Defence is that they put out this article, and it wasn't just in People magazine, it was just everywhere. And Suzanne comes up and she puts it right. The Defender picks it up and goes into more detail of Suzanne's interview. And so it's just together as a big team at Children's Health Defence, we've debunked the misinformation from the mainstream media. Absolutely.
And then after it's CHDTV and then Defender, it goes out on social media. So the message is getting out. And, you know, what is this about, Polly? It's false testing, just like PCR during COVID, and it's fear mongering, just like during COVID and just like for the childhood schedule. They don't really have a lot of new tricks up their sleeve. They just keep repeating the same tricks with slight variation. And so I'm so grateful to Dr. Suzanne Humphries to come on and really just debunk this nonsense.
Yeah, she did a fantastic job. And I know our viewers love having her on. So it's just great collaboration there. Okay, Brenda Belletti, Defender here. Not for kids. Adult-only AI is quietly powering kids' toys, reports warn. A new report from the US public interest research group Not for Kids Found in Toys warns that the flawed policies of major companies such as OpenAI allow powerful chatbot technologies to make their way into stuffed animals, robots, and other toys designed for children. My goodness, we have to protect those children.
Polly, this is frightening. You know, not only is there the radiation risk that our electromagnetic radiation director, Miriam Eckenfels, calls out, but this is literally programming children's minds. It could be really programming children to prefer computers to humans. We don't even know what they're saying to these kids. It's frightening. It's really frightening to me. AI, it has its advantages. I don't want to say that there's no benefits to AI. There are some benefits to AI. But what is so troubling here is that the manufacturers of these AI systems, or the programmers of these AI systems, are paying no attention to how their products are being used. They say that they're not for kids, but then they're allowing them to be used for kids.
Well, look, what a great week for news. I mean, we're really gaining ground here, people. Thanks to you all for your loyalty and following us and supporting us at Children's Health Defence. We do truly appreciate you. So one big team family effort, and we're really gaining ground. It's wonderful, Mary.
We're in it, Polly. We're in the fight. We're not going away, and we're winning. It's just going to take time. We haven't won, but we are gaining ground every day.
To let everybody know, Children's Health Defence has 2 amazing films out this year. Duty to Disobey, you can sign up on our landing page for alerts on how that's going and when you'll be able to see it, but you're not going to want to miss that. It was a complete another level education for me, that film, Mary.
Yeah. Well, I want to say that in many of these articles that we've just covered in Defender, there's an ad for Duty to Disobey, the film, that takes you to the trailer, and the trailer is riveting. It's worth watching.
Yeah. All right, everyone. So that's it for this week. Pray big, stand firm, never settle. And I'll see you tomorrow on Good Morning CHD.
Thanks, Polly. Thanks, everybody.
If they're spraying the skies, if they're poisoning us, all these things, do they not understand they're doing it to themselves and their loved ones?
I can make that point.
Please.
I know why they're doing that. I know exactly why they're doing that. They are addicted. They're addicted people. And what do we know about addicts is that they're willing to hurt themselves at the cost of having their addictions fed. They don't care if it hurts themselves. They don't care if it hurts others. They want power. They want control. They want to have access to this piece of technology at any cost. They don't care if it hurts themselves. And actually, in fact, they kind of even believe, if you really want to look at it from a transhumanist perspective, they believe that it's going to help them in the long run. They think that it's better for us to do these kinds of synthetic biology, human experimentation, and all the weird stuff that they're spraying us with, and how that's going to change our biology. They kind of think it's going to be for the better.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, that's beautiful, Paul. 3 goals. Number 1, Paul mentioned power. These people are very interested in power. Number 2, profit. There's a tremendous amount of money to be made leveraging pump, jump, and dump technologies. Let me invoke our dear friend and colleague, Catherine Austin Fitz, for just a moment. And she's fond of saying, look, there are 4 ways to make money in a tapeworm economy or in disaster capitalism. Number 1, you destroy things. Number 2, you rebuild what you destroyed in your own image. Number 3, when you rebuild, you privatize it and strip the assets for you. And number 4, you democratize it. In other words, you bring in the civil society actors to sort of put a nice bow on the whole project. And with geoengineering warfare, with weather warfare, we're seeing that 4-stage model play out across the United States and across the world. It's very interesting. So power, profit, and the third is, as I mentioned earlier, Paul touched on it, population control. And by population control, I don't mean necessarily culling the herd, although some people make that argument. I mean the replacement of natural biology with synthetic biology. Transhumanism is probably a phrase your viewers and listeners are familiar with. We're going to merge living, breathing creatures with our digital technologies.
All right, we have to talk about who is they? Who are they?
Maybe another way to ask the question, Polly, is who benefits from geoengineering?
All right.
Cui bono, who benefits? It's a long list. Yeah. Military contractors benefit from leveraging these particular technologies in collaboration with large defense contractors and big multinational corporations. Universities and colleges benefit because they get research and grant money, as we've seen with the pharmaceutical world, to research and experiment with a lot of these technologies. There are billions of dollars being made on the stock market in weather derivatives trading. So if you have an advanced knowledge of how the weather's going to play out tomorrow or next week or next month, you can make quite a bit of money in the markets that way. So that's just a short list of big players who stand to gain by leveraging weather warfare, geoengineering, without any public debate or discussion about it.
My name's Tom Remfer. I'm a retired Air Force colonel.
Excellent. And we're going to talk about anthrax for a bit. So first of all, can you explain to our people, because anthrax vaccine, you don't really hear about that very much. Can you explain to them what anthrax is and what an anthrax vaccine is supposed to do?
Sure. The intention of the anthrax vaccine was to protect our soldiers from that potential biological warfare threat that actually never materialized and never had materialized for U.S. service members in the past. And my involvement with the anthrax vaccine basically came about where I put my military training to work, was asked by my chain of command to evaluate the anthrax vaccine program and identify any problems, irritants in advancing the mandate for anthrax vaccine, which was their plan. And so, I was real grateful across my military career. I flew F-117s, I flew F-16s, I flew A-10s. I was very fortunate to have graduate and undergraduate education by the military, and everything that they trained us to do was all about finding problems, doing good critical thinking, identifying malfunctions and making sure that we fixed them, or in my case, we didn't take bad airplanes airborne. Similarly, we don't do approaches in unsafe conditions. We go around. What we discovered with the anthrax vaccine is that the program met a variety of no-go or abort criteria. Bottom line is they should have halted the program. We identified to the chain of command that the military knew the vaccine did not work. They had actually applied to the Food and Drug Administration to get a license for the vaccine, which they were not successful in doing. That later led to the whole program being enjoined, or the federal courts did an injunction. They stopped the program because it was patently illegal. But it kind of went further than that. We had identified that there were Food and Drug Administration significant quality control deviations that led to a notice of intent to revoke the manufacturer's license. This was all prior to the mandate. They basically had a shutdown manufacturer, a vaccine that was most likely linked to the Gulf War illness maladies out of the first Gulf War. And so basically it was a broken operation, total malfunction, and instead of listening to their troops, anybody that would essentially implement these operationally minded procedures and thought processes, they basically suppressed us. They accused us of treason, being traitors, if we didn't take the vaccine. This didn't set well with us, so we did not comply with the mandate. We believed that it was our literally moral, ethical, military duty, obligation to refuse the vaccine. We did. It was in a direct violation of a law called Title 10, Section 1107. And we went to work and we got a lot of allies in our own state. At the time, I lived in Connecticut. Senator Blumenthal, then Attorney General Blumenthal, supported us. H. Ross Perot, the highly respected veteran philanthropist, reached out, briefed him on multiple occasions, and he sent us to a whole bunch of meetings in Washington, D.C., from Senator Warner's staff to Senator Daschle, Representative Gephardt, my own congressman, Representative Chris Shays, who did a congressional report, had us testify to Congress a couple times. That congressional report said that the vaccine program was illegal, that they were using the vaccine in an investigational manner not allowed under the law. Mr. Perot also connected us with Mr. Rove in the White House, who I briefed. He connected us with people in the Department of Defense. They reviewed the program, and they basically came up with recommendations to Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld to stop the anthrax vaccine program altogether, minimize use of the vaccine, develop a modern vaccine, which to this day they still have not done, and develop a doctrinally coherent policy for dealing with these kinds of threats in the future. So everybody was agreeing with us. We were very fortunate. Kind of in contrast to COVID, we had a great deal of support, great deal of media attention. People actually did listen to us. Shortly after the Department of Defense review to stop the program happened, on the heels of 9/11, the anthrax letter attacks happened. You basically had a bioincident that was later confirmed by the FBI and the Department of Justice to have originated from the Army laboratory that was responsible for the anthrax vaccine. So allegedly, a scientist from the United States Army responsible for the potency testing of the vaccine sent the anthrax letters out in order to try to save the failing anthrax vaccine program. Problem was, it took the FBI 10 years to come up with these findings, and in the interim, it did resuscitate the program. So it was very disheartening to know that from an intellectual perspective, a legal perspective, you were on target, and even the federal courts ended up stopping the program, but they were able to start the program again because of those anthrax litter attacks, and they never went back and corrected the records of the troops that they wrongfully punished. About 1,000 troops that they kicked out, which compared to COVID injections, they kicked out about 10,000 troops. So the damage was 1/10 as much, but the exact same violations occurred. And with anthrax, it was very interesting that they essentially created a workaround. After the court said that the product was an unapproved medical product, they created the new emergency use authorization law, which would allow them to offer the product to the troops and let them keep using it, even though it was, quote unquote, unapproved. And so they actually published in the Federal Register, have it on my website, unyielding.org, they published in the Federal Register that they guaranteed the troops there would be no penalty, no punishment, no loss of benefits, no loss of entitlements. They would not punish troops if they exercised their legal prior consent right, the option to accept or refuse the vaccine. That was with anthrax, and that was the precedent because that is the law. They created a parallel law under 1107A, and they also created a parallel law under Title 21 of the U.S. Code for civilians. There's no question that emergency use authorized products, which if you look at COVID, that's all that was ever provided to the American people or the troops throughout the imposition of the deadlines for the mandates. So just as with anthrax vaccine, the COVID mandates were patently illegal in violation of the law. And so, again, in summary, the way I approach these issues is no different than I approach flying airplanes. It's exactly what, my passengers would expect. It's exactly what my government expected. It's exactly as I was trained to do. And so as we move forward, I think it's very important that if we're going to regain the trust of the American people, we have to make sure that future mandates are not implemented for unapproved medical products, emergency use authorized medical products, that when people do become ill from those products, that we look at those illnesses and don't deny them. And similarly, that our oversight mechanisms within the government, whether it be the courts or the Congress, that they listen to the people. It's fascinating but disappointing that in contrast to our era where there were dozens of congressional hearings, there literally has not to date in the past 4 years been a single hearing for U.S. service members to explain this tragedy that reoccurred in the military with implementing illegal orders. And whether or not people agree with me or not, all they have to do is read the Secretary of Defense's directive for the COVID vaccine mandates. It specifically said that they would only use FDA-approved product. They did not do that. They violated the Secretary of Defense's directive, and they need to go back and they need to correct the records. In my opinion, they need to correct the records for 1,000 or so soldiers during the anthrax vaccine era debacle. But for those 10,000 soldiers that much more recently have been removed from the military over COVID injections, they need to retroactively, unilaterally correct these kids' records. In contrast to our era where the courts stopped the vaccine mandate, the legislature, the Congress, through the National Defense Authorization Act, actually stopped the military mandate. It's because everybody knows what they were doing was illegal. They need to make it right for those troops. They need to correct their records, not by making them apply for corrections. Somebody with a stroke of a pen needs to do the right thing and needs to retroactively correct everything that they've done to these troops.
Right, and just to put, so for people that are listening and maybe a bit confused by just a bit of that, so basically what happened, and correct me if I'm wrong, the approved vaccine was called Comirnaty, and so Lloyd, what's his name? Lloyd Austin, he basically said, right, all military mandate this because it's FDA approved, but no one could find Comirnaty because there was no Comirnaty in America.
Correct, and his directive specifically said troops will only be mandated to take the FDA approved product. It didn't exist. They didn't provide it to the troops, yet they punished these troops and kicked them out even though it was an emergency use authorized product. And that law specifically said that they had the right to refuse that product. That was their consent right under the law. And the proof in the pudding really is the fact that the Department of Defense did not mandate the vaccines until approximately the August to September 2021 timeframe, when they came out with the gargantuan fraud of the FDA approval, even though that product did not exist. So they basically hoodwinked everybody, and they ended up punishing almost 10,000 soldiers by giving them general discharges. Congress had even told the Department of Defense, legislated, that they would give these kids honorable discharges. They didn't even live up to that. They gave them general under honorable conditions, which took away their earned educational benefits. It all needs to be reinstated. A government and a military that the American people can trust should have the courage and humility to do the right thing.
Now, you've got a book coming out, correct?
I do.
Tell us about it.
Sure. One of the gentlemen that I had worked with over many years, and then unfortunately he passed away shortly after the anthrax vaccine program was declared illegal. His name was Colonel Russell E. Dingle, and my book is basically a tribute to him because he was the intellectual leader of our entire effort. He came up with most all of the original arguments and discoveries that the vaccine program was patently illegal. He discovered in the Federal Register in a government repository in Hartford that there was no finalized license by the Food and Drug Administration for the anthrax vaccine. That became the foundational basis of what a bunch of other courageous attorneys, military retired attorneys, used in federal court to get the anthrax vaccine program declared illegal. So the book, Unyielding, comes out at the end of April.
Slowly. The book is called what?
Yeah, the book is called Unyielding.
Unyielding.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, basically the idea is stick to these principles that the military gave you, that the American people expect of us, and it doesn't end up necessarily working out in the near term, but in the long term, if you stick with those principles, make sure you do that critical thinking that the military expected of you, that in the end you can be proven correct. I was able to serve for a total of 32 years in the military. I always had that unyielding approach. I stuck to the rules, I stuck to the checklists, I stuck to my operational way of thinking that the military expected of me. I think that's why I was successful, but it also represents a great inequity as far as all of the troops that were punished. In my era, there were troops that were actually incarcerated, put in jail, and given dishonorable bad conduct discharges for simply wanting their prior consent rights to be upheld. It's wrong. It needs to be corrected. It still hasn't been corrected. For some troops it has, but they haven't done it unilaterally.
Wow, and thank you for your service as well, on behalf of Children's Health Defence. I also wondered if you could actually tell people properly where they could follow you or
Sure.
more information.
You can go to unyielding.org, and that'll show you the tribute to my buddy, Colonel Russ Dingle, the intellectual heavyweight in the fight for anthrax vaccine. The other website that's co-linked is hopingforjustice.org, using the number 4, not the word, but the number 4, hopingforjustice.org. There's a COVID tab. For years I'd had this website to try to help soldiers get their records corrected. With the advent of the COVID mandates that were also patently illegal, it became relevant to them. So there's a whole tab related to the patent illegality of the COVID mandates, to include the Secretary of Defense directive that was blatantly violated. And then also you can go through Skyhorse Publishing, and Children's Health Defense is sponsoring the book. So I'm very grateful to them. Yeah. And all of the profits for the book go to the widow of my colleague, of my late colleague. And so I've never asked for money, taken money, and I'm certainly not ever in the future going to accept any money. So any proceeds from the book will go to the widow of my colleague, and hopefully the book will provide readers a history lesson of the patterns between the illegal anthrax vaccine mandate and the illegal COVID injection mandates, and hopefully that historical text and reference will serve military members, citizens, and most importantly, the target audience, government and military officials. They need to read it, they need to heed it, and they need to regain the trust of the American people.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for sitting here and doing that, and I really look forward to your book.
Thank you, Polly.
Thank you.